Hello, everyone.
And welcome to Dad
And Me
Love History.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
It's been a little while since our last episode, but don't worry, if you keep listening and spreading the word about our podcast, then we will keep podding as and when we can. And today we're very excited. We're going to be talking about Britain's current Queen, Elizabeth II, and her father, King George VI, and even her uncle, Edward VIII. So, James, what do you call a guy who's slapped by the king?
I don't know. What do you call a guy who gets slapped by the king?
A sore subject.
Yeah. Elizabeth is Britain's longest reigning monarch, meaning through 1,000 years of history, no king or queen has been in power as long as her.
Yep, this year's her Platinum Jubilee.
That means she's been queen for 70 years.
But today, we'll be going back to when she was a young princess to investigate why Elizabeth was never supposed to be queen.
And we are joined by a special guest author, Susan Webb.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing over there in America?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. Susan's written, Susan's an author, and the book she's written is a children's book about Elizabeth's father, George VI. And she's going to help us understand why Elizabeth was not supposed to be queen, and even how her father was not supposed to be king. And you got a pet name for Elizabeth, don't you?
Yes, I call her the unexpected queen because she was never supposed to be queen of the United Kingdom.
So why was she the unexpected queen?
Well, when Elizabeth was a little girl, she was a princess, and her father was Prince Albert. And Prince Albert had a brother named Prince Edward. Well, Edward and Albert had a father who was king, and he was King George V. And so King George V ruled for a very long time, but then he became old and ill and he passed away. And that meant that Edward had to be the next king. So Edward became King Edward VIII, and his children were supposed to be the next king and queen, not Bertie and his children.
Bertie. Now tell me, was Elizabeth II's father called George, or was he called Bertie, or what's the deal there?
He was called all sorts of names. He had a very long name, and I don't know why, but his full name was Albert Frederick Arthur George. So his first of those four names was Albert. So his friends and family shortened that to Bertie. It's a nickname for him. And then when he became king, he became King George VI. Generally, when kings are crowned, they like to take the name of a king they truly admired. And he admired his father, King George V. So he took the name King George VI.
Right, got it. Why was the king unhappy with the weather?
I don't know. Why was the king unhappy with the weather?
Because it was raining.
Ha!
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history.
And so Bertie's brother, King Edward, became king and didn't have kids?
Right, he did not have kids. And that was a big problem in England because Edward was dashing and handsome and popular, and everybody loved him. And he loved to be out with everybody. He liked to socialize and congregate and dance, but he didn't like to do kingly things like read long reports or to listen to his ministers or to make speeches. That just was boring. So He wanted to relax and have fun. And can you imagine what he did next?
No.
Well, he said, I don't want to be king anymore. It's boring. I want to run off and I want to marry an American, and her name is Wallis. And the people were appalled. They said, what do you mean you don't want to be king? You have to stay king. And he says, no, I don't. I want to run away and marry Wallis, and I'm going to. So he wrote a letter to his family and the people, and he said, I'm giving up the throne, I'm leaving, and I'm running off to France to marry Wallis. And he did.
Wow. So what happened next?
Well, England was in an uproar. They didn't know what to do. This had never happened in history before. So who was going to be the next ruler? Well, it was the second son in line, and that was Bertie. So dear Bertie, with his stutter, he had to be king. He was terrified. He dreaded speaking because he had this stutter, and he'd shake and tremble and get all red, and he'd spit. It was just horrible. He felt so embarrassed he wanted to go through the floorboards. But the government said, you're our next king. So they crowned him King George VI.
Why was King Henry VIII terrible at conversations?
I don't know. Why was he terrible at conversations?
He would always cut people off. Wow, so yeah, he really hated sort of speaking in public. And I think most of us can relate to that. What about you, James? Do you ever get nervous if you're speaking in front of the class at school or on our podcasts or when we're interviewed on radio?
Yes, I do get nervous.
So what do you do about it?
Well, I just remember if you're nervous, that means you care about it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, if you don't care, then you've got nothing to be nervous about. So that kind of nervous energy, maybe it helps concentration. Anyway, back to the story. What happened to Bertie?
Well, Bertie had to figure out what to do. How could he talk when he had a stutter? Well, he came across a speech therapist named Lionel Logue, and Lionel was from Australia, but he was living in London at the time. So Lionel started working with the king, and they do vocal exercises. You know how you do exercises in gym for your body? Well, these were exercises for his voice to loosen up his throat. And they did tongue twisters and they recited rhymes. So Lionel helped the king think of tricks and ways around his stutter and how he could say certain words better. And do you believe that Bertie was king and he couldn't say the word king?
No.
Yes, that's pretty embarrassing. So he had to work really hard at his stutter. And as king, he had to make speeches, a lot of speeches over the radio like you two are doing.
The fattest knight at King Arthur's round table was circumference. Because he ate too much
Pies?
Exactly. Listener, that's going to sound like we scripted that. He didn't know. I've got a clip here of one of King George VI's speeches. This is in 1938, before World War II starts. So let's see what we can hear here.
A whole town of more than 100 individual palaces and pavilions. This is a remarkable achievement, and in recognition of it, my first...
So, James, are you hearing him stutter?
Not that much.
Must be one
No.
of the
Yeah, he's not so much sort of stuttering as
emphasize
pausing a lot and really taking his time.
And that was the trick that Lionel told him to do. When he knew he was coming up on a word that was going to choke his throat and he'd probably stutter or spit it out, he recited rhymes or tongue twisters in his head. So he was already thinking normally, and then he'd quickly say the next phrase or the next word. So he'd have to pause.
Wow, yeah, and I've seen that movie, The King's Speech. Once upon a time, there lived a king who was only 12 inches tall. He was a terrible king, but he made a great ruler. Anyway, so that was 1938, and then the following year, 1939, in Europe, World War II breaks out.
That's right. That's right. Can you imagine poor Bertie? He's thrust on a throne he doesn't want to be on. He has a terrible stutter. He can't talk to people. And then his nation is attacked and is under siege. That must have been terrifying. And he ruled incredibly well. And did you know Buckingham Palace was bombed, James?
No.
Yeah, it was. And the king and the queen were inside it, but they were very lucky that they weren't hurt. And so that must have been an incredibly scary time in Britain. I couldn't imagine being here in California and having my town bombed every night. And they lived through it all.
Yeah, it's something that I think about. My parents were born during World War II, and my hometown where they still live, Portsmouth, it's a Navy town, and so that was kind of, well, a lot of it was flattened. And then London, the last city we lived in before we left the UK, of course, was hit more than any other city. How does old King Wenceslas like his pizza?
I don't know. How does he like his pizza?
Deep and crisp and even.
Dad.
So just to bring our listeners up to speed here. So we're talking about Princess Elizabeth, how she wasn't really supposed to be queen because it was actually her uncle, King Edward VIII, who was expected to remain king and have children, and then obviously their children, and then their children would all be next in line. And of course, Edward abdicates, which means like quits. He resigns. And Elizabeth's father, Bertie, also known as George, takes over, King George VI. And at that time, Elizabeth is a young princess. So from there, Susan, how did Princess Elizabeth become queen?
Well, her father was getting very tired and very sick. He was smoking a lot. It was the stress of the war. It was the stress of being king, the stress of making speeches to people. And he got very sick. So he went into the hospital. They found out he had cancer. So he had an operation, and he actually had to have his left lung removed. Well, that takes a long time to recover from. So while he was recovering, Princess Elizabeth was standing in for him, and she was going on royal trips. So he sent her on a trip to Africa. And while she was in Africa, poor King George VI passed away one night in his sleep, very suddenly, very unexpectedly. So Elizabeth immediately became queen. She was queen and she didn't even know it yet. So she left England a princess and she returned home a queen. And that's why I call her the unexpected queen, because no one expected when she was a little princess that she would ever sit on the front throne of England.
For Elizabeth I was the longest reigning monarch at the time, up until many years after she died. So she was 45 years on the throne when a time 500 years ago, 400 years ago, when people didn't live as long. And now, and now Elizabeth II, of course, is still going at 70 years on the throne. And there's going to be big celebrations, right, in June this year for the Platinum Jubilee.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm going to be going back over to London in June for the Platinum, and I was actually there for her Diamond Jubilee 10 years ago. That was incredible. I was actually on a boat in her flotilla on the Thames that day, and so it was historic. I saw the Queen and Prince Philip and Charles and Camilla and William and Kate and Harry and Edward and Sophie. It was just phenomenal, but the weather was insane. The gnashing wind and the rain and the cold, but wonderful.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's what we call summer back in the UK.
That's right. And did you know that I went to Buckingham Palace for the balcony wave later that weekend? And guess what I was wearing, James?
What?
A garbage bag. Yes. I was wearing a Glad trash bag. I came to England without a raincoat, and the only thing in the apartment that was durable were big garbage bags. So I donned a garbage bag and went to view the Queen.
Are you going to bring a raincoat this time?
Definitely.
Oh, well, that's it's great, and we really appreciate your having your expertise on the show today. Thanks so much. And so you've written like a children's picture book with wonderful illustrations. I've had a read and look all the way through it, focusing on Elizabeth's father, but Elizabeth certainly features in it too. So it overlaps a lot with the topics we've talked about today. What's the book called?
It's called Bertie, the Best Stuttering King, and I wrote it in rhyme. Have you ever heard of Dr. Seuss over here in America?
Yes. When we lived in Hong Kong, he was a thing there, at least in international schools, and here in Australia as well. He's known, right? So go on.
So I wrote it in Dr. Seuss style with rhyming stanzas, and I did that to loop back to Bertie and his stutter, because Lionel Logue used to use tongue twisters and rhymes to help him with his stutter. So I wrote this book to help young stutterers, and I hope all kids will like it. Any kid, I think between 7 and 12, will really enjoy this with, thank you, as you said, beautiful illustrations by Sergio Drummond. He's an amazing illustrator.
And where should our listeners go to find out more about you and your books?
Well, you can find my books on Amazon and also a place called thebookpatch.com. And my website has lots of wonderful pictures showing Bertie and his castles and news about his life. And that's at www.susanmwebb.com.
And listener, you'll find those details in the show notes and also on our webpage, dadandmelovehistory.com. So thanks again for joining us on Dad and Me, Susan.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Finally, what do you call a man who never tells the truth and marries a queen?
I don't know. What do you call him?
The Lion King. The Lion King?
Oh. And so that's almost it from Dad and Me.
Yeah, as usual, listen out for the little bonuses after our end theme music.
And get in touch with us on
Instagram
and Facebook
and Twitter. And please share our podcast on social media, rate and review us wherever you listen.
Bye from now.
From Dad
and me.
And me.
Love history. Hey.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. we could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Today we've got some true or false questions.
Number 1. True or false? King Edward VIII was Elizabeth's uncle.
2. True or false? Bertie was King George VI's nickname.
Number 3. True or false? King George VI's real name was Louis.
4. True or false? Princess Elizabeth was in Asia when she became queen.
Number 5. True or false? Queen Elizabeth II is about to celebrate her Golden Jubilee.
6. True or false? James never gets nervous.
Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Excellent.
I saw the funniest cartoon. I'm watching James help you with the equipment. And the funniest cartoon this morning, there is a father feeding his little baby in the baby chair. And the father says, now, when you get onto solid foods, you have to start helping me with the computer equipment.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
That's pretty much it, isn't it? Should be okay. We've got 2 cats. One of them can be really noisy, but we've got the quiet one in here at the moment. I think I subconsciously, whilst I was talking, pressed the mute button to mute George.
You're like most people wanted to do. Just mute the guy. You're still trashing the man. He's been in the grave for how many years?
Oh. I think we've already got some good bits for the outtakes.
I'm not saying the jokes. You're saying the jokes.
What was the name of the king's extra night?
I don't know. What was his name?
Surplus. Surplus. A surplus means if you've got too much of something.
Oh.
This might make the outtakes the best, that one. Who is the king of potato chips?
I don't know who.
Well, it's like another word for king in a different part of the world, in a different culture. Sultan. Sultan vinegar. What's it called when a king and queen have no children?
I don't know. What is it called?
A receding air line. Oh, that's just too complicated. So receding hairline, like heir to the throne, receding airline, no hair. We're going to scrap that one entirely. Where does the king of cows live?
I don't know. Where does the king of cows live?
In the cattle, because it's one letter different from castle.
Oh.
That's terrible. Why was King Triton angry over Ariel's report card?
I don't know. Why was he mad?
Her grades were under the sea. That's like from a Disney movie, right?
Yeah. Now questions?
No, because I haven't read them yet.
5 from now.
From Dad.
And me.
And me.
Love history.
History.
Hey. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Oh, well, I don't think we'll be going on the road anytime soon, with the big axe, but it was
5 for now.
From Dad.
And me.
And me.
Love history.
History.
Okay.
Did it work?
We've got the satellite delay, but I think that just makes it more real. I think that's okay. What do you call the king of the classroom?
A ruler.
Oh, you knew that one. You worked it out.
Yes.